I'm very pleased to be joined by Gregory Floyd, President of Local 237, International Brotherhood of Teamsters. Welcome to CityWide.
Good to be here, Ken.
These are exciting and challenging times for unions and union members. What are some of the issues that you're dealing with?
Thank you. Ken, first I want to thank you for allowing us to come on the show and just express our views and how we see the city shaping up over the next few years, and just speaking about important issues both for our union members and the citizens of the city of New York. These are challenging times because one would point to the economic crisis that we are facing and about to face. We have a difference. I remember when I was in school reading about and hearing about the financial crisis of New York City in the 70s and reading about so many things that were done, 1 week furloughs, layoffs, and there's a distinct difference between then and now. The difference is the rest of the country had money. Now, no one has money. The world is in the crisis. So these are really more challenging times than the 70s. So we are facing an uphill battle, and it's going to take some really good planning. It's going to take some cooperation. It's going to take cool heads, and we will get by this because we are a city of resolve. We're a nation of resolve, and just everybody has to realize that we have to tighten our belts, and we cannot do business as usual. We have to curtail our spending, curtail some of our habits, and we will be able to survive.
When most people hear the word Teamsters, it conjures up the notion of a truck driver, probably white from the Midwest someplace. But your members are in the metropolitan area, many of them Black, Latino, Asian, as well as Caucasian. Tell us a little bit about Local 237, who you represent, and the kind of work that your members do.
Well, we are a unique union. First of all, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters represents everyone from attorneys to zookeepers in between. We have police officers all over the nation. We have different titles. Yes, but we do have the brand of truckers, Teamsters. That we're never going to get away from, the horse, the Teamsters, the horse and buggy. However, we have the largest local in the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. We have 24,000 members.
That's pretty big for a union local, right?
Yes, it's very big. We have school safety agents. We have CUNY campus peace officers, hospital police officers. We have 6,000 peace officers that work for municipalities. We have the MacArthur Airport security out in Long Island. We have a Long Island division. We have 3,000 blue and white collar workers on Long Island. We have 9,000 New York City housing employees, everyone from elevator mechanics to the people who clean the buildings, and we have the managers who manage the buildings. We have food service people in Rikers Island, Department of Education. So we have a variety of titles. We have over 200 titles. And
you have some lawyers also.
We have some lawyers also. We have the city lawyers. Yes, we do.
Let's talk a little bit about politics, and then we're going to come back to some of the economic issues and specifically some of the things that your members are dealing with in their daily work. What did the Obama victory mean to your members, and what did the Obama victory mean to organized labor on the national scene?
Well, one, to my members, what the Obama victory meant was we endorsed the candidate. We endorsed Barack Obama. To have a major candidate win the presidency that we endorse is big. Two, being an African American, having the first African American elected as president is huge.
Did you expect to see that in your lifetime?
No, I did not. I really didn't. Some people have passed on, unfortunately, and didn't see that. But there was a man, a great man, Bobby Kennedy, who was asked that question 40 years ago, and he said it would take 40 years. And I don't know what he had, but it was 40 years to the election, and this came true. Second, what does it mean to the city of New York? What does it mean to our members as a whole from a financial standpoint? We have a crisis in the New York City Housing Authority, and they're underfunded. They have 19% of their budget lost over the last 8 years with George Bush. We are really remaining hopeful that we will have some kind of funding that we can maintain this great system of public housing here in New York City. that over 500,000 people live in. So that's what it means. I mean, because if Barack Obama did not win, there would be no hope for the future with public housing.
Let's talk a little bit, because I think most New Yorkers probably don't realize how big the housing authority system is, how many people it affects. I think you said you had 9,000 of your workers who work at public housing. What's it like in a public housing project today?
Well, what it's like today is you have less services because there were over 2,000 layoffs, reduction of services. You have senior citizen centers and after-school centers being closed. And these are centers that are needed by the senior citizens who really paid their dues in society. And they're needed by the children who are trying to start a future. They're our future, and we need to invest in children. They need computer centers. They need lab centers. They need after-school programs. So if we don't take care of them, we're just throwing away our future. We have 178,000 families that live in public housing. We have over 78,000 seniors that live in public housing. We have 500,000 people living in public housing. So you're talking about public housing is bigger than most cities. It would be, what, the 13th largest city in the United States? That alone. And we cannot ignore 500,000 people. To me, 500,000 people in this city wins an election.
The Housing Authority has come under some real criticism lately over conditions in the properties, particularly elevator safety. Accidents, allegations of neglect, people complaining in some developments that their elevators are broken more often than they're working. Those are your members that are doing the repair work there. What's your take on the situation?
Well, from the standpoint of the residents, unfortunately, they're correct. When the elevators are probably broken more often than not. The reality is, and the fact is, they're broken because of the neglect from the government, the Bush administration, not funding housing, not funding capital improvement projects, that these elevators can be replaced. Some of these elevators should have been replaced 4 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. However, the unfortunate financial situation of the Housing Authority, living day by day, hand to mouth, they cannot afford to fix the elevators. You need capital improvements. You need preventive maintenance. You need to have the money so these things don't occur. And basically, the people in NYCHA, New York City Public Housing, have been ignored. And unfortunately, these things are occurring more often, probably because the elevators are at their breaking point.
But you say that they've been ignored, but isn't it also true that the public housing very often is among the election districts in the city where the fewest number of people vote?
Yeah, that's the perception. However, I believe in this last presidential election, that changed. And for anyone watching in public housing, our message is clear and simple. If you don't vote, you're going to be ignored. I think they voted in the last election, and I think they saw some change. You want to see funding? You got to continue to vote. You have to have your issues out front, your issues, public housing. You really count. So we started a campaign from the union, and we also partnered with some of the advocacy groups. But we sponsored voter registration cards that went out in the publications. We are sending a clear message. We campaign in public housing, and it's very simple. You must vote to count, and you must tell everyone who's running for office exactly what you want and what you expect from them, and you hold their feet to the fire.
So why should the taxpayers of America, acting through the federal government, why should the taxpayers of the city of New York, why should they put money into public housing? Why shouldn't more of the burden fall on the tenants themselves?
It's very simple. If it was not for public housing, the tenants would have nowhere else to go. And at the rate of affordable homes, affordable apartments, co-ops, etc., being built in this city, I think we will all be living in the housing developments in NYCHA, because there is no public housing, there is no affordable housing being built. It's very few affordable housing complexes. The programs aren't there. The programs, just on our block, we're on 14th Street alone, there's a condo that's going up, $3 million apartments. And then you have to pay the maintenance on that. So this city has become the city of the wealthy, and the poor are being left behind. Matter of fact, the poor are now reclassified. We're reclassifying the middle class as poor. So the others, we're going to put them in the destitute column. They're half a step away from being homeless.
We're going to talk more about how you fight to protect the interests of those folks as well as your members when Citywide continues right after this.
Don't say that.
You don't have to look at it. Be a little bit more creative. I'm going to say nothing.
Left-handed people are smart.
They are.
Dad, do you want to get the phone?
No.
Every year, 1 million families face losing their homes to foreclosure. If you're ignoring your mortgage issues, things will only get worse. Call 1-888-995-HOPE, because nothing is worse than doing nothing.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Gregory Floyd, president of Teamsters Local 237. In addition to public housing, you mentioned earlier that you represent a lot of public safety officers. And in fact, I think that's how your own career started. Why don't you talk a little bit about your background, how you came to be the president of Local 237, and also about the kind of work that the public safety division in your shop does?
Well, I started off in 1984. I was a hospital police officer at Queens Hospital Center. I became a sergeant, worked at Woodhull Hospital. At age of 24, age of 27, I was a captain in the hospital police. So I kind of rose through the ranks kind of quickly. I started working for Local 237 14 years ago. And over the 14-year period, I was the deputy director, trustee, citywide secretary treasurer, and fortunately, the position became available, and I was appointed president by the remaining board members after retirement.
So what does a safety officer do? What's the job like? And would we be better off having police officers do that work? Are they just security guards? What does the work involve?
We have peace officers who are really, I would say, they have the sensitivity of community policing because they're really from the areas that they protect. Take for instance, school safety agents. Most of them were products of the public school system. Most of them are parents that have children in the school system. They don't have children in the school system. They have nephews. They have nephews and nieces. They really care about the public school system. We have hospital police officers. We have CUNY campus peace officers. Some of them are students, because if you work for CUNY, you can go to school for free. That's part of the CUNY work agreement. So we have students and peace officers, and they go on to very good careers. We had a campus peace officer who became the director of security for the College of Sarah Lawrence. So we have a lot of success stories in our programs. We have a lot of police officers who were once our members who moved on. In corrections, we have a lot of members in corrections. And it's really, I would say, it's a training ground, and it's also a place that you can really come, learn, work in a good environment, have good benefits, and really learn about city government, learn about law enforcement. And for those who choose to stay, you have a nice pension system to work toward. For those who choose to move on, you have a great experience that you can take wherever you want to go. I meet people all over the country that were members of Local 237 and peace officers. Yeah.
After September 11th, was there a shift in emphasis in terms of the kind of training that the safety officers received? Is terrorism part of their curriculum now?
Terrorism was a big focus in 2001, 2002, 2003, but the further you get away from September 11th, 2001, the further you get away from terrorism. Unfortunately, people only remember for a short period of time, and then you have the basic ideologies that you have to reserve your budget and you cut back on things, and the first thing most municipalities do is cut back on security. Well, we haven't had an incident, so therefore we could scale back the security, which means if you look at it the other way, maybe you didn't have an incident because you had a lot in heightened security. When you scale back, those who look to do us harm know we're vulnerable and they attack. And then we go back to the way we were, and then the cycle continues. We scale back, they attack. We heighten, they lay off.
You alluded earlier in the show to the fiscal crisis of the 1970s. The city, on the verge of bankruptcy, pointed out, I think very astutely, that at that point we could, as a city, turn to the federal government for relief. But in that time also, there was a feeling of shared responsibility and camaraderie between the business leaders and the union leaders. But there was also a sense that there were larger than life figures on both sides of the bargaining table that were could come together, a handful of people, and fashion a remedy. People like your predecessor once removed Barry Feinstein, Victor Gottbaum, Al Shanker for labor, and on the other side, people like Felix Rowett and elected officials like Governor Carey. Today, is it the same dynamic? Is it a dozen people who can sit around and restructure the pension system of the city, or is it a more diffuse leadership? And is that a change in how politics is conducted, or is it because the personalities are different?
Well, you have two things here. One thing we know is we still have people around from then that can also advise. Two, we haven't lost our sense of what we need to do and what we can do. Although we're not household names, we're every bit of intuitive, and we're every bit of intelligent as our predecessors because we had them to learn from. The difference is we don't have the press coverage that we once had. So you don't focus on us. You don't hear, oh, it's Barry Feinstein, oh, it's Greg Floyd. Who's Greg Floyd? We still learn, we still have the same lessons, and we know what we have to do, and we're facing something far greater than those men and women faced in the 70s.
Is it confrontational? In other words, when you meet with business leaders today, or when you sit down with the head of the housing authority, are you starting from being poles apart, or is there already some consensus of where everybody needs to be going?
I think there's a consensus because you, I, we read the papers, we know the realities, we know what can be done, we know what should be done, we know our fiscal restraints, we know that we need to, one, keep members working, we need to keep benefits, we know we need to keep the city, which pays us, financially sound because we don't want a financial control board to come in. We know what the mission is, and we got to balance that with going into the future, that we don't throw away everything, that we can't get it back in the future. So one thing we know, if you give up something, you never get it back. But we don't want to bankrupt the city. We don't want to see the city fail because we have a vested interest. Because if the city fails, we all fail, and no one's going to be around for the future. But
legally, many of your members work for organizations that are public authorities that are semi-autonomous. The Housing Authority is a 3-member board appointed by the mayor. CUNY as a board overseeing the chancellor. The Health and Hospitals Corporation, yes. The same type of structure. But at the top of the pyramid is the mayor. Yes. Because he appoints people, because he funds them, or because if he holds a press conference, grown men quake. What kind of a boss is Mike Bloomberg?
He's very smart, very shrewd, a very good businessman. He ran the city like a business. After September 11th, 2001, when he was elected, we knew we were facing hard times. And for a period of time, he ran a surplus. And I have to be honest with you. There was a surplus. Contracts were done. We had a surplus. We're doing some cuts. We're looking at a budget deficit. But how much more of that deficit would have occurred, or how greater would that deficit have been had it not been for Bloomberg forward thinking and just preparing for this moment?
There has been some criticism of the mayor lately over congestion pricing, over his about-face on term limits, over his reluctance to issue the property tax rebate checks, that he's a little out of touch with the plight of ordinary New Yorkers, that he's got a superb 100,000-foot viewpoint, but that he's not necessarily seeing the impact that current conditions are having people on the ground. Do you have a sense of the mayor's fundamental fairness towards working class and disadvantaged people?
Well, let me take those three things. Let me start with congestion pricing. One, we know there are a lot of cars, too many cars in the city. We know that. Whatever the figure was it $300 million that the federal government was going to give the city for congestion pricing? You would gain money from congestion pricing. Couldn't we use that now? Mm-hmm. Yes. But in conjunction with that, we also need to develop an alternative to people driving in mass transit, because we don't have enough mass transit. So congestion pricing is good, but you also need to develop an alternative, because people will use other means if they're available. Right. The issue of the $400, well, listen, in the past, politicians, I would say politicians, have given tax cuts just to get elected, creating greater deficits. What about that community tax we gave back? Couldn't we use that now? The answer is yes. Now, New York State is facing a deficit. We don't have the community tax. We gave away taxes, we gave away money, and we can use that. So if the mayor says, well, you know what, I'm going to keep this rebate, we can't afford to give it back, you know something? $400 to everyone. If you put it on the scale, you say, well, I'm going to give you $400, but it's going to cost you another $1,500 because the service is being cut, the garbage is going to pile up, less police officers, less firemen, so your house burns down because the fire department can't get there quick enough. I think the person would say, I'd rather pay the $400.
So you think that going into 2009 that the mayor can withstand this criticism?
If he answers it, if someone thinks like that. Also, but I also want to tell you this, because I didn't address the term limits. In 1993 and 1996, I voted against term limits twice, because I didn't think it was right to have term limits. If you have somebody that's good, you want to keep them there, that's great. 1993, 96, I voted against term limits. However, the way this was done, without putting it back to referendum, because in this country, the majority rules, you had 29 people, stroke of a pen, vote, and no one else had any say. That's a bitter pill for a lot of people to swallow. So although, you know, you have some good there, a lot of people are finding it hard to swallow that this was rammed down their throats almost at midnight. And I'm just saying, in 93, 96, I voted against term limits, so I was one of those people who voted against it. However, I was in the minority at that time.
My thanks to Gregory Floyd, president of Local 237 of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. I'm Ken Fisher. Thank you for joining us on this edition of CityWide.